you making enough there to live on your own? Where did you live? And what? Tell me about that time period. How did you live? Where did tell me along that line? So, what's the first thing you did when you found out about that? How were you living even before then?
When I first went to Birmingham, I lived in a one-bedroom room at over at 5 Points South, which is on 13th Street, which is now part of UAB. And I lived there for almost a year. And I had these friends that worked with me at Coca-Cola Bottling Company, and one of them had an apartment, was getting an apartment, and she wanted somebody to share her apartment, and I said, oh, yes. Apartment, back then, it was right after the war, and was really hard for women to find an apartment, because all the apartments were rented to the boys that were coming home from service. And this woman, the houses were, there wasn't enough apartments in Birmingham, so these big houses were closing off rooms and making apartments out of them. They were taking closets and making a kitchen out of them. And so this was just a big bedroom with a small kitchen. And we had to share the bathroom with the people who owned the house, which was not good. So we lived there for, she was dating this guy that she was real close to him. And so they was going to get married, and they got married. So that left me with the apartment. But I was making enough that I could still swing the apartment by myself, because it wasn't very much. And if I watched everything that I could make it, I still could make it. So I was working with this the girl from home, from up at Curry. I knew her when I went to Birmingham. I had gotten back in touch with her, and so we were got to be pretty close.
What was her
Worked together. Her name was Faye Miller.
Okay.
And so I got her a job the next day after I got mine. She was working for Liberty Trouser Company in Birmingham, and she didn't like it. She'd been there for a couple of years, and so she wanted another. I told her that they was hiring at the Coca-Cola Company, because during the war everything was rationed. Let's go back. Everything was rationed. Well, sugar was rationed. Well, that meant the Coca-Cola Bottling Company didn't have a whole lot of sugar, so their Cokes were not out very much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when they released the sugar, Coca-Cola Bottling Company went bam so fast that they had to put on a night shift. And so Faye went to work with me, and so the apartment that she was living in, she didn't, the girl that she was living with also worked with us, and she was not happy with the situation. But in the meantime, we was working together but not living together. But I was working with this girl that had this apartment on 33rd Street, 31st Street, because we worked on 31st Street. And it was a duplex house, and it was an apartment. It was a living room, one bedroom, a bath, and a small kitchen. And so she had just rented it, and she wanted somebody to move in with her. So she asked me, and I was real hesitant because I didn't know her that well. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, I decided to try it. Well, in the meantime, Faye was really getting unhappy with her situation. And I said, well, Faye, 3 of us can live in that apartment. So why don't you just come in and rent too? So, okay. So she came along with me. And the lady that we was living with had rented the apartment to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
She decided that after we were with her for a week, 1 week, she decided that she was from Mississippi or somewhere out in that area, and we didn't know her well enough to know anything about her. She decided that she was going home for a week and she would come back. She went home, but she didn't come back. We never heard anything, and we didn't know anybody. And the people that we rented from was a Dr. Hargis, which had a Hargis clinic there in Norwood. And so they didn't know anything about her either.
So what happened to her stuff?
This Miss Hargis told us that if we would pack her stuff up and bring it down, that she would put it up in the attic, and if we ever heard from her, that there would be her stuff. Well, she didn't have anything but clothes.
Okay.
Because the apartment was completely furnished. But Faye had a bedroom suit that she wanted put in there, so we took her stuff out, the Hargis places out, and the couch out, and we bought a hide-a-bed. So that meant we would have, before the girl left, that was 3 of us, so, okay. So we had a bed that we could make in there, so she never came back, so about 3 months after she left, we tried to find her and everything, and one of the guys that she had known called us, wanting to know where she was, and we didn't know. He knew nothing about her either. He had just met her. And so nobody knew anything about her, no background at all. So there was another girl that was working with us, and her name was Nell. And Nell was, there was 1 week, exactly 1 week's difference in mine and her age. We were exactly the same age. And Faye was a year older. So Faye worked with us, Nell worked, so all 3 of us worked together, and we all 3 lived together. And we had a ball. We went out. I had never been to a dance in my life, of course. And everything was so new. I was going with this boy and going regularly with him, and so I wasn't dating, and so this guy from one of the drivers from Coca-Cola Bottling Company had seen me, because he was a driver, and they brought all the drivers around and showed him everything, how all the Coca-Colas were made. And so he decided that he wanted to date me, and he couldn't find out anything about me, so he followed me one night, which I didn't know, and he got on the trolley, that was when I was still living over at 5 Point South. And he followed me all the way around till I got off. And somehow, I don't know if he went to the office, I don't know how he found out, but he got my telephone number. And he kept calling me, and I said, no, I'm going steady with this guy. No, He kept on and on and on until finally I decided, well, I would just go with him and find out, what was going on. But lo and behold, guess what happened? His first cousin and his girlfriend all came to pick me up, and guess where we went? To a nightclub. Never been to a nightclub. Well, that was my first experience going to a nightclub. And that was my first experience dating boys, because I'd been going with this other boy for so long, off and on. So, well, Faye got to where we got together, and we double dated everywhere. So when we dated boys that were close too. So we had a plenty of them. Just coming and going. We went out all the time. So that was our experience with everything going on in Birmingham.
Tell me a little bit about Birmingham, the city a little bit. Have you seen it change throughout the years? What are some of the things that you remember? You said the trolley, which of course Birmingham does no longer has a trolley.
No.
What other things do you remember fondly about Birmingham?
Well, first, when I went to Birmingham, they still had one streetcar. Went from Bessemer to Pratt City. And the trolleys were great. They're better than those buses they have now. It was just really good. I loved the trolley. I loved getting on no trolley and ride it. It was when you went over stuff, and instead of bouncing like they do on the buses, it just flowed over. Just really good. And you could even stand up and walk and all that on it. It was really good. And I worked from 5 over at 13th Street to 33rd Street on the trolleys without having to change because it went all the way through. And I traveled the trolleys for a year, never having to get an exchange slip because I just rode that one. But that was changing. Oh, all your big department stores. If you was going to go shopping, you had to go downtown because we didn't have shopping centers then. Eastwood was the first really big shopping mall that we had. Several of them tried them, but they weren't big and they weren't really big shopping centers. And at that time, my life was different at that time too. I have to go back because we were traveling so much at that time. But we had the oh gosh, what was a Williams store, and Burger Phillips, Bazit's, all those big downtown and going. One of the main things that you went to if you didn't go, if it wasn't nightclubs and got at night, you went to movies. Go downtown. You had the Lyric, you had the, of course, Alabama Theater, and you had the Temple Theater, which was live music and live stuff. Oh, that was nice. And then we had the City Auditorium. I never, ever, ever liked country music. And I liked my baseball games. And when the Birmingham Barons, at that time, we had a team here in Birmingham, and they was well known. And Tuesday night, I think it was, Tuesday night was ladies' night. And I went to ladies' night. And Faye loved her country music. Mm-hmm. And she liked wrestling. I didn't like any of it. So that's going to change me, but I changed them. She and Nell, if I didn't go to the games, I listened to it on the radio. And they didn't even understand it. They didn't even know anything about the baseball. So I said, okay, I will go to wrestling with you, Faye, if you go to the baseball game. Okay. She went to the baseball game with me. She got hooked. I went to wrestling one time. I said, this is so much fake, I can't stand it. So I didn't go back, but she still went with me to the baseball games. And they didn't change my music either. I listened to my music in the living room, and they listened to theirs in the bedroom. But we got along just great. We didn't have any troubles with our datings. We got along all the way through. It was good.
Were there any music that you enjoyed going to? Any concerts that you can remember going and seeing? Anyone who stands out in your mind?
Francis Craig was a blind pianist, and they had him at the Temple. He was fantastic at that time. He was well known, and so I went to see him. And let me see, wait a minute. Who was he? crazy people that I went to City Auditorium to see. Ugh, can't
Spike,
think, huh?
Spike Jones
No.
in the city
It was a
centers?
silly group, and I can't think of their name, and they were well known, and I can't even think of their names because they were well known back then, and that was really a treat. The guy that I worked with from the Coca-Cola Bottling Company was the mechanic, and so he kept wanting to date me, and so he told me he had tickets, and so boy, I went with him, but I didn't date him anymore. I just went with him to go to get to go to that whatever. So yeah, we had stuff going on. There was plenty of activity going on. You could have your choice. You could it- what they you had different. You had all the theaters, and you had uh, stuff that would happen at the city auditorium was specials and stuff like that. So there was plenty going on right after the war when everything began to boom, and everything began to boom really big then.
Is there a certain actor or actress that you enjoyed seeing and that you would, when their movie would come out, you would go see them? You would know that such and such is coming, has a new film, I want to go see it.
Not particularly. I wasn't that much into people in the theaters and things like that. Did not do me so much. Clark Gable and oh gosh, what was her name? The beautiful lady that not Bing Crosby, but Frank Sinatra married. He divorced his wife and married her, and that was a lot of talk about that because that was not good to be done. So that was when they really began to be really bad about following famous people and getting their names, things that they would do to get their names
To Ava Gardner?
yes, 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 yes. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, all those, yes.
Let's go with food for a moment. When you go out to eat, is there any restaurants that stick out in your mind that you remember during those days that you enjoyed going to, or was it more?
Little Davina's was one of our favorites, and that was down, oh gosh, across from, down close to Sears and Roebuck in that area. And they were Italians, and they were really true Italians. And when you went there to eat, you got true Italian food. Nobody, everywhere I've ever been, anybody has never done spaghetti and meatballs like theirs was.
The name again was Little
Divini's.
okay.
They were both a little short, heavy-set peoples, and they were a lot of fun. And we'd go in there. Some of the girls from work and us would go in there. So when I got married, then John and I would go in there. That was one of mine. And then you had to go. There wasn't a lot of good restaurants at that time. You had no drive-ins. The first drive-in that I remember was Chicken in the Basket, and the one that we would go to was the one up on by Vulcan. As you were going up the mountain there by Vulcan was Chicken in the Basket, and oh gosh, I can't remember. Now we had there at Norwood, where we lived on 31st Street, there was restaurants, but I don't remember their names. They were not famous little restaurants, nothing like that. And I was never a big eater, so food was not my big thing, you know. And I only ate one big meal a day, and that's all I ate anyway. So And at that time I smoked. Hey, my cigarette was more important than food. Gosh. When you had a break at work, you went and grabbed a cigarette. That was another thing that was rationed. That's how come to start smoking. We had cigarettes, tobacco, was rationed, and you had to stand in line to get all this stuff. You had to stand in line to get cigarettes. You had to stand in line to get hose, nylon hose, and all this kind of stuff. So.
In Birmingham during the war, was there much in regards to what we now know as blackouts or power outages, or was there any worry in regards to anything along that line? What did you know in regards to any things like the Chinese encampments or any rumors going around in regards to Nazis and anything along that line, or?
No, when I was in Cleveland and working, I worked with a little German girl who had came over to visit some of her people, and the war broke out, and she couldn't go back, and you could hardly understand her. She had picked up enough English the 2 years she'd been here because she couldn't go home, and that was the only situation that I knew of, when back then, and living out in the country and not being in the city during the main part of the war, you didn't get as much stuff, and the only thing you got was what's on radio, and that wasn't real often like it is now. You'd hear it just every now and then, but you didn't get a lot of what was going on.
Okay, so let's talk about the other entertainment in regards to radio. That was one thing that we'll talk about. Is there something you remember in regards to having a huge radio in your living room, what you would listen to?
Yes, radio was a piece of furniture. The first radio that we had was looked like a piece of furniture, big, stood up, had a little bitty place about like this, where the dials were, and everything else was a piece of wood, nice furniture,